When I first moved into this apartment, it felt like a dream. The rent was suspiciously low for the area, but I told myself I'd gotten lucky. The place was spacious, the building was old but charming, and the previous tenant had left in a hurry, leaving behind some furniture. I didn't ask too many questions. It wasn't until my third week here that I noticed something strange. In the bedroom, behind a tall wardrobe, there was an uneven patch of wall. It didn't match the rest of the paintwork, and when I knocked on it, the sound was hollow. I thought maybe it was just poor construction or an old repair job. But the more I looked at it, the more it seemed intentional. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the wardrobe aside and ran my fingers along the wall. That's when I found a small metal latch, almost invisible under the faded paint. My heart started racing. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled it. I became obsessed with retracing every single step from that day, as if reliving it might unlock the missing pieces. I visited the same street where I'd last walked with my parents, sat on the same park bench where I'd once eaten ice cream. I even bought the same flavor, but it tasted like paper. Nothing triggered the memory. The neighbors had theories. Some thought my parents had been hiding from dangerous people. Others whispered about debts, affairs, or something darker. I didn't know what to believe. Every rumor added more weight to my chest, making it harder to breathe. Then one afternoon, I was sorting through my mother's jewelry box, something I had avoided for years. Beneath the false bottom, I found an old key attached to a small leather tag with faded numbers written on it. A locker number. My heart raced. I followed the trail to the city's oldest train station, the kind where time feels stuck in the 1980s. The smell of dust and iron filled the air. Locker 312 was tucked away in a dim corner, its metal door scratched and worn. I slid the key in, hands trembling, and pulled it open. Inside was a single manila envelope. I took it home before opening it, afraid of what it might contain. The paper inside was brittle and yellowed, covered in typed words. It wasn't in English. At first glance, it looked like a legal document, but then I saw my name. And my parents' names. It was an adoption record. Only, the parents listed weren't mine. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those same moments, the blurred images from my memory, the fragments that didn't fit together, the things that made me feel like my own life had gaps in it. The police report, the whispers between relatives, the way my mother avoided eye contact whenever I asked about my early childhood. It was like everyone around me had agreed to keep me in the dark. The next morning, I did something reckless. I packed a small bag, took the little money I had, and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. My plan wasn't even a plan. It was just an instinct. Something in my gut told me that the truth wasn't going to find me unless I went looking for it. I started in the nearest town. I walked through streets I had never seen before, feeling like a stranger in my own country. Every face seemed like it could be someone who knew something about me. I went to libraries, old archives, dusty government buildings. I requested documents with my name, my birth date, anything. Most of them came back clean. Too clean. No hospital record from my birth. No photo from my first years of school. It was like I didn't exist until I was already 5 years old. And then, I found it. A small envelope inside a forgotten drawer at the municipal archive. My name was handwritten on the front in a style that felt both familiar and foreign. Inside was a faded photograph, a little girl, no older than 3, standing in a yard I didn't recognize, wearing a dress I had never seen before. Behind her stood a woman, smiling faintly at the camera. She wasn't my mother. The handwriting on the back said only one thing. If you're reading this, they haven't told you the truth. Days turned into weeks as I chased fragments of a life I never truly lived. The photograph haunted me, the little girl in the unfamiliar yard, the woman who wasn't my mother, and that cryptic message scrawled on the back. I had no idea who they were or what truth I was supposed to uncover, but it felt like a key, a door opening into a place I wasn't meant to enter. I started tracing the location in the picture. The background was faded, but some details stood out. A rusty swing set, an old oak tree with a carved heart, and a cracked mailbox with peeling paint. With the help of local maps and some old-timers in the area, I found the address, an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town, about 100 miles from where I lived now. When I arrived, the house looked even more worn than in the photo. Windows boarded up, the garden overrun with weeds. The swing set was still there, creaking softly in the wind, and the oak tree stood tall, scarred by time but unmistakably the same. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Floorboards groaned beneath my feet, and cobwebs clung to the corners like forgotten memories. As I moved through the rooms, I felt like I was walking through a ghost story, the kind you hear around campfires, where shadows stretch long and the past refuses to stay buried. In the attic, I found an old trunk. It was locked, but rust and time had weakened the metal. With some effort, I forced it open. Inside were letters, photographs, and a journal bound in cracked leather. The handwriting was neat but hurried, a woman's script, filled with sorrow and fear. The journal belonged to the woman in the photograph, the one who wasn't my mother. Her name was Evelyn. As I read, a story unfolded, one of love, betrayal, and sacrifice. Evelyn had been a young mother, fighting to protect her child from a past that refused to let go. She wrote about running, hiding, and finally making a choice that would change everything. The last entry ended abruptly, with a single sentence underlined twice. They will come for her, but I will keep her safe, no matter the cost. The weight of Evelyn's words pressed down on me like a physical force. Who were they? Why did she believe danger was chasing her? And who was her, the child she was desperate to protect? My mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Was this little girl me? I dug deeper into the journal, piecing together Evelyn's fractured story. She wrote about a man, someone violent and controlling, who had haunted her steps for years. She spoke of a night when she made a decision to disappear with her daughter, to erase their identities and start anew. The more I read, the more I realized that my whole life might have been a carefully constructed lie. That I wasn't just someone's daughter, I was someone's escape. That night, back at my apartment, I found myself staring at the journal, feeling lost in a maze without walls. The phone rang. It was an unknown number. I didn't answer. When I checked my messages later, there was just one. You're closer than you think. Stop digging. I froze. From that moment on, nothing felt safe anymore. I started noticing strange things around my apartment. A shadow that lingered too long in the hallway, unfamiliar cars parked near the building, footsteps that stopped when I looked up. My phone battery drained faster, and I caught glimpses of a figure watching me through the fogged window across the street. Despite every instinct screaming at me to stop, I couldn't walk away. Evelyn's story had become my own. I returned to the farmhouse one last time, hoping to find answers in the surrounding town or among the few remaining neighbors. Most people avoided me, their eyes flicking away when I mentioned the old house or the name Evelyn. But one elderly woman, sitting quietly on her porch, agreed to speak. Her voice was a whisper, but the weight of her words hit me like a hammer. She told me Evelyn had vanished decades ago, her daughter taken away and never seen again. Some said the daughter was adopted, others whispered darker fates. The woman warned me to be careful, the past didn't want to be uncovered, and some truths could ruin lives. The days after my visit to the elderly woman were a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow a threat. I stopped answering unknown calls and avoided going out after dark. But the feeling that I was being watched never left me. Then one evening, I found a package slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was an old photograph, yellowed and creased, with an image of a little girl standing in front of the same farmhouse, clutching the hand of a woman I now recognized as Evelyn. On the back was a single word written in hurried handwriting, "Remember." That night, I sat staring at the photo, heart pounding, mind racing. What was I supposed to remember? What truth had been buried, so deep it needed to be forced back into the light? I knew then that my search had only just begun. Whatever shadow haunted Evelyn's past was now intertwined with my own, and I couldn't turn back, no matter how much I wanted to. That night, I realized I had crossed a line. The diary wasn't just a story. It was a warning. The days after my visit to the elderly woman were a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow a threat. I stopped answering unknown calls and avoided going out after dark. But the feeling that I was being watched never left me. Then, one evening, I found a package slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was an old photograph, yellowed and creased, with an image of a little girl standing in front of the same farmhouse, clutching the hand of a woman I now recognized as Evelyn. On the back was a single word written in hurried handwriting: remember. That night, I sat staring at the photo, heart pounding, mind racing. What was I supposed to remember? What truth had been buried so deep it needed to be forced back into the light? I knew then that my search had only just begun. Whatever shadow haunted Evelyn's past was now intertwined with my own, and I couldn't turn back, no matter how much I wanted to. The photograph haunted me in a way that no nightmare ever could. It was more than just a picture. It was a fragment of a story that had been deliberately hidden from me, like a piece of a shattered mirror reflecting a face I didn't fully recognize. I studied every detail: the little girl's tight grip on Evelyn's hand, the worn shoes, the cracked steps of the farmhouse porch. I traced the edges of the photo with trembling fingers, feeling as though the faint smell of damp earth and old wood lingered in the paper itself. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the apartment echoed like a warning. I found myself jumping at every shadow, my heart racing even during the quietest moments. I started taking notes, everything strange I encountered, every fleeting memory that resurfaced, every hint that something wasn't right. I wrote about the cold dread in my chest, the feeling that my life was a carefully scripted play and I was only just realizing the lines had been written for me long ago. Days blurred into nights, and I realized I was trapped in a liminal space, caught between the life I thought I knew and the darker reality clawing its way into the light. Friends called, worried about my withdrawal. I brushed off their concern with a shaky smile, but inside, the pieces of the puzzle were suffocating me. One afternoon, determined to find more answers, I returned to the town near the farmhouse. The locals were wary, eyes narrowing as I mentioned Evelyn's name or the abandoned house. It was clear the past was a wound they preferred to keep covered. Yet, in a small, dimly lit cafe, I found an old man willing to speak. His voice was gravelly, soaked with decades of silence. He told me that Evelyn had been a woman feared and pitted, a mother running from shadows darker than anyone dared to name aloud. He hinted at a scandal involving powerful people, threats whispered behind closed doors, and a desperate act of sacrifice. But when I pressed for details, he shook his head and said, "Some stones are better left unturned." That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I heard a knock at the door, a soft, deliberate tap that sent a cold shiver down my spine. I didn't answer. The knocking stopped, but my mind raced. Was it a warning? An invitation? Or something far worse? I realized then that my life had become a silent battlefield where the enemy was unseen but ever present. The past wasn't just a memory, it was a force threatening to consume me. The next morning, my apartment felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I kept replaying the man's words over and over, wondering what he really meant. What kind of sacrifice? Who were the people powerful enough to bury Evelyn's story, erase her existence, and now, perhaps, erase mine? I felt like a ghost caught between worlds. Half of me wanted to run, to escape this dark truth and pretend it never existed. But the other half was fueled by a desperate need to understand, to reclaim the pieces of my identity that had been stolen. I returned to the attic of the farmhouse one last time, determined to find whatever clues I could before the answers slipped away forever. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet as I climbed the narrow stairs, each step echoing in the empty space. Inside the trunk, I found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, brittle with age. I untied them carefully, unfolding the pages covered in slanting handwriting. They were from Evelyn to someone named Jay, filled with pleas for help, descriptions of fear, and promises to protect her daughter at all costs. One letter stood out, Dated just days before Evelyn disappeared, it spoke of a plan, a final attempt to escape the shadows that haunted them. She wrote about a hidden room beneath the farmhouse, a place she hoped would keep her daughter safe, no matter what came next. My heart pounded as I searched the attic walls and floor, feeling along every crevice until my fingers brushed something cold and metallic, a small, rusted handle embedded in the floorboards. With trembling hands, I pulled it open to reveal a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. I hesitated, knowing that whatever lay beneath could change everything. But I had come too far to turn back now. The air that greeted me as I descended the narrow staircase was cold and stale, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettling. The darkness pressed in from all sides, swallowing the light from my flashlight in greedy shadows. Each step echoed quietly, a soft rhythm of descent into the unknown. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, covered in dust and cobwebs, and scattered with objects whose purpose was unclear. A collection of glass jars filled with murky liquid, faded photographs pinned to the wall, and stacks of yellowed papers tied with string. In the center of the room stood a worn crib, the paint chipped and peeling, and inside it lay a bundle wrapped tightly in a faded blanket. My breath caught as I approached cautiously, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. I hesitated, then carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside was a worn, stuffed animal, a rabbit with one eye missing and seams carefully mended. It was nothing more than a toy, but it felt like a relic of a life paused or hidden away. On a nearby table, I found a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and soft with age. I opened it to find entries written in Evelyn's handwriting, frantic notes, dates, and warnings. One passage chilled me to the bone. If they find her here, everything will be lost. I will protect her with my life. She is the last piece of my hope. I realized then that this hidden room had been a refuge, a desperate attempt to keep someone safe from whatever darkness hunted Evelyn and her child. As I read on, I discovered a startling truth. Evelyn's daughter was not just a victim but a key, someone who carried secrets powerful enough to threaten dangerous people. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. The walls seemed to close in tighter, the silence growing heavier. I wasn't just uncovering history, I was stepping into a legacy of fear and sacrifice. The question burned inside me. Was I Evelyn's daughter? Was I the girl she had fought so desperately to protect? The weight of the possibility that I might be the child Evelyn had hidden settled over me like a storm cloud. Every memory I had, every unanswered question about my past suddenly felt charged with new meaning. If I was that girl, then who had I been living with all these years? Who had I really become? I left the hidden room with the journal clutched tightly in my hands. Back in my apartment, I pored over every word, trying to piece together the fragments of Evelyn's story and what it meant for me. The entries mentioned names I didn't recognize, friends, enemies, shadows from a life I was never told about. One name appeared repeatedly, M, a presence that loomed large in Evelyn's writings, a figure she feared above all else. She never revealed more, only that M had the power to erase lives and silence the past. As days passed, the sense of being watched intensified. I found my apartment door unlocked one morning, small signs that someone had been inside. My books shifted, papers moved. My sense of safety was shattered. Desperation pushed me to reach out for help. I contacted a private investigator, a quiet man who promised discretion and determination. I handed him the journal and photos, explaining as much as I could. He agreed to dig into the name M and the mysterious people from Evelyn's past. While waiting for answers, I took extra precautions, changing my routines, installing cameras, never letting my guard down. Then, late one night, I received an anonymous message. "Stop digging, or you will disappear too." Fear coursed through me, but the fire to uncover the truth burned brighter. I wasn't just searching for my past anymore. I was fighting for my future. Days blended into restless nights as the warnings grew more frequent and insistent. The line between reality and paranoia blurred. Every unexpected knock, every flicker of a shadow made my pulse spike. The private investigator's updates were slow, vague. He was treading carefully, but something about his unease told me the danger was real and close. One evening, as I reviewed the journal by the dim light of my desk lamp, a hidden letter slipped from between the pages. The paper was thin and fragile, the ink faded but still legible. It was addressed to me. The letter began with a familiar handwriting, Evelyn's, but the words were a confession, an explanation meant for the daughter she never got to raise openly. She wrote about the love that had saved her, the betrayals that had broken her, and the terrible secret she carried. A secret that threatened to unravel not just our family, but a web of powerful people who would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. Her final words were a plea and a warning. If you are reading this, it means you have found what I hid away. Know that the past is not safe, and neither are you. But you must not let them win. Trust no one but yourself. Protect the truth, and protect yourself. I folded the letter carefully, a chilling resolve settling over me. The shadows chasing Evelyn had found me, but I would fight. Whatever this legacy was, it was now mine to bear. The days that followed felt like living in a nightmare painted in grayscale. My every move was shadowed by an unseen threat. The message in Evelyn's letter echoed in my mind, driving me to question everyone around me. Trust was a luxury I no longer possessed. The private investigator returned with unsettling news. The name M was connected to a powerful figure, someone deeply embedded in the city's elite circles, known for manipulating lives from behind a veil of influence and fear. This person's reach was vast, and their enemies often vanished without a trace. I realized then that the danger wasn't just about uncovering a family secret, it was about exposing a conspiracy that spanned years and swallowed lives whole. I started keeping a journal of my own, every odd encounter, every unexplained event. The entries grew darker, filled with paranoia and fear, but also a determination that burned brighter with each passing day. One night, a knock shattered the silence. It was urgent, desperate. I opened the door to find a stranger, someone who claimed to be a friend of Evelyn's, sent to help me now that the past was catching up. Her eyes held a mix of sorrow and resolve as she handed me a small locked box. "Inside is everything you need," she whispered. "But be careful. Once you open it, there's no going back." I closed the door, clutching the box tightly. Whatever was inside was the next piece of the puzzle, and possibly my last chance at truth. The locked box weighed heavily in my hands, a physical manifestation of the secrets I had chased for so long. I sat at my kitchen table, heart hammering as I carefully unlatched it. Inside were photos, documents, and a USB drive. The photos showed Evelyn, young and terrified, alongside a man I recognized from the journal, M. He wasn't just a shadowy figure, he was my biological father. The documents detailed a conspiracy that explained everything. Evelyn had been pregnant with me when M., a powerful and dangerous man, forced her to disappear. To protect me from his influence, she had staged her own death and hidden me away. The adoption records, the fake identities, they were all part of a plan to keep me safe from a man who could destroy lives with a word. The USB held videos, hidden recordings Evelyn had made. In them, she spoke directly to me, explaining her love, her fear, and her sacrifice. She begged me to live freely, but warned me that M's reach was vast, and that I must stay vigilant. I realized the truth I'd feared was the one I needed to face. My entire life had been shaped by a desperate fight to protect me from a darkness I had never seen until now. But even as I uncovered the truth, I knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a new battle, for my identity, my freedom, and my future. I wasn't just Evelyn's daughter. I was a survivor,